In this lecture, I want to teach you how to do form validation to validate database entries and how to use a grid in order to display rows in a database. Okay, so I start by defining a database table to represent olive jars actually. So I say db define table. I will call the table olives. Okay. And so every olive has a name, and I call it field. So I need a comma here. Field. I call it olive name. I don't call it simply name because there are reserved words in SQLite, and I don't want to risk using a reserved word as name for one of my fields. Okay, so field olive name. Then there will be a field olive kind. Okay, then there is a field that is weight total, okay, for the gross weight, which is a double. And then I want a field weight net, which is also a double for the net weight of the olives. Okay, and here I want to specify some properties of these fields. I could also do it here by saying, for example, requires is equal to, but this time I want to keep these definitions short and I want to do it below just for clarity. So the first thing I do is that I do not want the ID field to appear in the form because there is no point when I edit an olive jar to say, oh, this is the olive jar 13. Why? You know, I just want to change its name. So I say db olive, this is to avoid displaying the ID, and I say db olives ID readable is equal to db olives ID writable and is equal to false. So this sets them both to false, is a kind of a shorthand. Then for the name, I want to accept only names that are longer than 3 characters or 2 characters. So I say db olives olive name. By the way, let me define a label for the olive name. I want to call these simply name in the form name, where t is a translation object, okay, and I need to import it. And so I need to import it somewhere from there, okay? So this gives the name that will be used in the form for the olive name. And then, as I said, I want to enforce a minimum length. So I say db olives olive name requires. The requires fields enable you to specify conditions that are checked every time you use a form for insertion or editing. And so I check that is length has a min size of 3. Okay, so every name has to be at least 3 characters long. So this is a validator. Okay, it's imported from PyDAL validators import star. So that's where the validators are imported. And the documentation for validators, unfortunately, momentarily at least, you need to find it in the Web2Py documentation, not in the Py4Web documentation, okay? There is a chapter on validators, let me show it to you, forms and validators, that describes at some point the validators. So the validators come from PyDAL, and so they apply also to Py4Web. And there is a large number of them, and you should at least once browse quickly through them so that you know which ones exist. You can ask for integers or floating point to be in a certain range, fields to be non-empty, emails to be properly formatted, things to be in lower or uppercase. There is a whole bunch of them that enable you to enforce many conditions. If none of them fits, you can look at how they are defined, and it's actually quite easy to define your own validators for your own purpose, okay? You can look at the code definition of one of these. For example, we could browse to the definition of is length, okay? We can see that this is a validator that inherits from a general validator class, and we could write our own validator if we so needed, okay? For the moment, we are just going to use the standard ones, though. Great, so this takes care of the name. Now I want to say that the gross weight, I want to call it weight gross, and I want to make sure that it is between 0 and 1,000 grams, so between 0 and a kilo. So I can say db olives weight dot label. First I fix the name, and I say weight gross, okay, and then I fix the requirement db olives weight total requires is equal to is float in range, okay, and I can say it's between 0 and 1,000. I can specify also an error message. So the error message is equal to the translation of please specify weight in grams. Sorry. Between 0 and 1,000, for instance. Sorry, formatting problems, okay? So for the net weight, I want to do something similar, and I want to say that the weight is gonna be the net weight, and this float in range also, okay? And so this does it, except for one thing, that is there is this field olive kind, and I want that field to be a multiple choice among a restricted set of choices. So for that one, I'm gonna do it as follows. db olives olive kind requires, and so here I use a validator that asks is in set, okay? And for beauty, I want to define my olive set once and for all, perhaps here at the top, okay? Like olive kinds, and this I want to define it as a dictionary that maps the database content, which can be, for example, a single character or a short string, to what is displayed to the user. So I want to say, for example, that the single string K will stand for Kalamata, okay, and the single string L will stand for Ligurian, okay, two kinds of olives. And so here I can say that this requires is in set of the set that is olive kinds, okay. This will have actually two effects, as we will see. This will have the effect of validating the entry, that can be only one of these two values, but it will also offer to the user a drop-down choice between the two values when we create the forms, okay? So this is how the database table is created, and now I want to move on to the controller to define a controller for inserting new olive jar types, and I also want a controller that displays to me all the olive kinds that I have, okay? So that's our next task.